including Middle East Burning and 101 Answers to Questions about the Book of Revelation. He's a graduate of Dallas Theological Seminary with a THM and a PhD. He serves as senior pastor of Faith Bible Church in Edmond, Oklahoma. He served also as an adjunct professor at Dallas Seminary. He and his wife Cheryl have 2 sons. Mark Hitchcock, welcome to today's Issues.
Well, thanks for having me again.
Mark, tell us about your new book. I mean, if there's ever a timely book, you've got one just out from Harvest House called Iran and Israel, Wars and Rumors of Wars.
Yeah, it's a book that I've written, because of all that's going on over there with Iran and with Israel, and just the constant back and forth. And heard you all talking about some of the other parts of the world. There's just wars and rumors of wars everywhere. But I think the one that's most central to biblical prophecy is what we see happening over there with Iran and the threats they're making. And we hear all the saber rattling right now and the things coming from North Korea. But with Iran, they may be close. There's different varying views of how close they are to crossing the nuclear finish line. And these are people who have a very radical, apocalyptic view of the end times. These are not the people you want to have their hands on nuclear weapons, who've threatened to wipe Israel off of the map. And there's all the geopolitical concerns with that, but even more so, I think there are biblical issues related to that, because I think what we see happening over there today with Iran and Israel and all the things that are taking place are setting the stage, or part of the build-up, if you will, for incredible Bible prophecies that were written about 2,500 years ago.
Mark, I want to ask you, this is Tim, by the way. Thanks for being our guest. I want to ask you a question about that. Back during the about how close maybe Iran is to having a nuclear weapon. Back during I remember the vice presidential debate between Joe Biden and Congressman Ryan. Joe Biden was asked about this, the vice president, and he basically poo-pooed it. I mean, I think I'm characterizing this right. He said, "Hey, listen, we've talked to Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. We stay in touch. Don't worry about this. They're ways away from getting this weapon, and when they do, we'll get back to you. We'll let you know. But otherwise, quit fretting about all this." I mean, that's. But you remember that moment? Did you watch that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, pretty cavalier type statement.
Yeah.
Because here's the problem is President Obama said recently that Iran is about a year away from having nuclear weapons. The problem is our intelligence isn't that precise. It could be 8 months, it could be a year, it could be 15 months. So no one knows the exact date. The other problems for Israel doesn't have some of the deep bunker busting weapons that we have. So Israel, the red line. You remember Netanyahu in the United Nations had that bomb there, and he drew that red line. The red line for Israel is sooner than it is for us. And, of course, Israel faces a lot more repercussions from this than we do, too. They got a lot more on the line. So Benjamin Netanyahu said at the UN that the red line for Israel with Iran was this summer, the summer of 2013.
Yeah. So, Mark, are you saying there's a biblically prophetic part of this division between Iran and this hostility between Iran and against Israel?
Yes, there is. There's a prophecy, an ancient prophecy given by the prophet Ezekiel, written about 570 BC, so almost 2,600 years ago. And the prophecy of Ezekiel in Ezekiel 38 and 39 tells us that after the Jews have been regathered to their land, that's Ezekiel 37. When they've been regathered to their land in the end times, which obviously we've seen, there's 6 million Jews now almost living in Israel, that a coalition of nations are going to invade Israel in the end times. And the ancient names are given. It's places like Rosh and Meshech and Tubal and Togarmah and places like that. Now, what we do is we look on a modern-day map and say, well, where were those people back then in Ezekiel's day, and who lives there today? And these nations are mentioned there, and one of them that's mentioned is Persia in Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 5. That's going to be a part of this end-time coalition. And, of course, we know Persia is modern Iran. The name was just changed in 1935 to Iran, and then it was changed in the late 70s to the Islamic Republic of Iran. So the Bible tells us that when Israel's back in their land, and it also says in Ezekiel 38 it's going to be when they're living securely. and they're at rest, that there's going to be this invasion by this coalition of nations, and one of those countries will be Iran. And I've wondered myself if all the things happening now, say Israel were to make a preemptive strike against Iran, and maybe the U.S. were to get drawn in, and all, the dominoes begin to fall, and there's all kinds of things happen over there, some kind of regional war, that could be the trigger or precipitate this worldwide cry for a time of peace. And we know the tribulation period, the coming time of tribulation, starts with a peace treaty, with peace for Israel. So it could be that the events we see today are going to play into that somehow. But certainly what they're going to do, if Israel hits Iran, it's going to set the stage then for Iran to hit Israel back at some point in time.
What you're right. And here's the part that's also, I know we're not necessarily talking about a person in Ahmadinejad that thinks logically. I understand that, or reasonably, and we know that the mullahs or the ayatollahs, the Islamic religion, run the show over there with Ahmadinejad. But here's the thing: if Iran were to launch, let's just say worst case scenario, horrible, catastrophic scenario, that they would launch a weapon against Israel. I'm talking about a weapon of mass destruction.
Yes.
You're talking about landing a weapon where Arabs and Muslims live.
Right.
And, good night. Israel, yeah, they got the Jews over there, but they're surrounded by countries that are Muslim countries. So you're gonna hurt a lot of fellow Muslims as well if you did something crazy like that. What would be the advantage to Iran for doing something like that?
Well, whether they'll do it or not, no one knows. They've said they will. Same thing kind of like in North Korea, all this bravado and a lot of bluster and statements that are made. But certainly the threat has been made, and I think it's a serious one. But Iran has this view of the end times, though, that they're waiting for their Mahdi to come back. And they believe their Mahdi or their Messiah is going to come back in a time of warfare and bloodshed and chaos. And they believe they can actually speed up his coming. They can hasten the coming of the Mahdi, kind of like they see themselves as the modern John the Baptist, if you will, kind of to lay out the red carpet for him. So it may be that they would say this is just going to be collateral damage. Also, you have to remember Iran is Shiite Muslim. A lot of the other Muslims in the Middle East, 85% of Muslims worldwide are Sunnis. And there's not a love lost between some of them. So, how Iran would figure that in with everything, I really don't know. But, they've made that threat, and I think it's a serious one. They certainly want to see the Jews destroyed. And whether they would do it with a nuclear weapon like that, or whether they try to do it through, sending Hezbollah in and Hamas.
One other question, and I know Ray has questions for you about this. What is you mentioned the Sunni-Shia difference in the Muslim world. 85% are Shia. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm,
okay,
that's right.
Let me ask you this about that. What is it specifically about the Jews that makes Ahmadinejad and the Iranian, those people who would want to kill them and wipe them off the face of the earth? The Iran, I understand the Palestinian, overland, we've been wronged, and I understand that whole thing, whatever you believe about that. I understand the argument. But this guy over in Iran, 1,000 miles away, or whatever it is, what's his motivation for being so anti-Semitic and wanting to kill the Jews?
Well, ultimately, I would say it's satanic. It's motivated by Satan. But you're asking, what are kind of the human reasons for that? Well, they believe that any land that's ever been controlled by Islam is still under the control of Islam and is owned by them. And so, obviously, too, Jerusalem's the third most holy site in Islam.
But the Jews let the Muslims worship there. They don't even.
Well, sure they do. But it's basically an idea that they call them the Zionists. The Zionists, they have no right to be there in that land. It's not their land, and they see also Iran does that the U.S. is the big Satan, Iran's or Israel's the little Satan, and they believe that both Israel and the West, mainly the U.S., need to be destroyed in order for their end time scenario to come to pass.
And
So that's part of their
okay.
whole apocalyptic, genocidal view, is that this is what's going to have to happen for these events to occur.
Let me just say this one other thing about that is not all the people in Iran are anti-Israel, anti-Semitic,
No, that's right, sure.
anti-American. There's a large segment of Iranian people who would like to see freedom in their country, and they don't like their country being perceived as, the dreg of the world, if you will.
No, that's right.
So I just wanted to make that clear.
No,
Brad?
there are a lot of people there, sure, in Iran. There's a lot of believers there, and the gospel's getting in there. And a lot of Iranians are very pro-American. But the problem is, it's kind of like with Hitler and Nazi Germany.
Right.
When the Mullah regime over there controls the government and the power structure, the people just get pulled into that.
You're listening to today's issues here on American Family Radio. We're talking with Mark Hitchcock. He's the author of Iran and Israel, Wars and Rumors of Wars, published by Harvest House. Mark, tell us where people can get a copy of your book and where we can find you on the Internet.
Well, they should be able to get a copy at their local Christian bookstore. I always like to send folks to their local Christian bookstore to buy books. It should be there. Also, it's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, all the internet outlets. My website is marklhitchcock.com.
Okay, Mark
Hitchcock.com.
Hitchcock.
All lowercase, yeah.
Okay, great. Mark, whenever we talk about Bible prophecy here on AFR, the question always comes up about America and the end times. And you've got a whole chapter in your book called What Will Happen to America? So where does the U.S. show up, if anywhere, in Bible prophecy?
It's one of the most asked questions I always get. Where's America going to be in end-time prophecy, and especially with in relation to this situation with Israel and with Iran? Is America going to join in with Israel against Iran, a preemptive strike, and what will happen, and all those kinds of things? My view is the Bible doesn't mention America. Certainly everybody agrees America is not mentioned explicitly in the Bible, and there's no America or United States. Those words aren't found there. But some would say, well, America, though, is the 10 lost tribes of Israel, or maybe we're this unnamed nation in Isaiah 18, or maybe we are Babylon in Revelation 17 and 18. There's a lot of different places that people find America, that they believe they find America. I don't think America is mentioned in prophecy, and I've examined some of those different views in the book. But my view is America is not mentioned, and some would say, well, America is not mentioned just like a lot of other countries aren't mentioned in the Bible. But it seems odd to me, if we are the world's greatest political, economic power that's ever existed, it seems strange to me that we wouldn't be mentioned in the end times if we are that great power.
Mark,
in fact, Revelation tells us that the beast of the Antichrist is going to be ruling the world. So I think the facts to me line up that something's going to have to happen to America to remove us from being the great power broker we are today.
Mark, we understand, and your book talks about there's a coming, you call it a temporary Middle East peace, and then there's a future Middle East war. Which comes first, and how does one set up for the other?
Well, I think the peace comes first. Now, again, there may be a lot of wars and things happening over in the Middle East before this peace treaty comes, but my view is that a peace treaty in Daniel 9:27 is where it's spoken of, that the Antichrist brokers with Israel. That is the event that starts the 7-year tribulation period, in my understanding. And I put this Middle East war, Ezekiel 38 and 39, after that event. Now, other good Bible teachers put it before that. Some think it's going to even be maybe before the rapture takes place. So, there's differences of when it's going to happen, but in my understanding, this treaty will come first because it says Israel is living at rest and living securely whenever this invasion occurs in the end times. So I think that's what's going to give them this false sense of security. And so I believe that will happen. And then sometime after that treaty, when Israel's got this false sense of security, that's when Russia, Iran, these other nations I mentioned in Ezekiel 38 are going to come down into Israel to try to wipe them off the face of the earth.
It's an interesting question to ponder, because clearly the Israelis have more on the line than we do in terms of their relationship with Iran. If Israel decides the danger is so acute that they launch a preemptive strike, clearly the Iranians would try to strike back. That would seem to plunge put us on the verge of World War III.